I want to put forward in this video what I think is the hardest objection to respond to if you're a Christian.
Cosmic Skeptic recently published a video where he talks about what he believes to be Christianity's biggest problem, the problem of animal suffering. In this video, I'm going to tell you why Alex's case is essentially an emotional appeal that directly contradicts evolutionary theory. But that's not even the half of it, because what you're about to witness is how Cosmic Skeptic's biggest shot against Christianity surprisingly turns into his most powerful argument for it. This is going to be very exciting. Hi, my name is Lucas and this is my channel Deflate, which challenges skeptics, strengthens believers and aims to create great conversations about God. Guys, it is super important to me to make clear from the start that I really respect and appreciate Alex, and that everything I'm about to say is meant as an engagement with his worldview rather than as an attack against him personally. Now you have to know that the case Alex puts forward has nothing to do with animal suffering which is inflicted by humans. Instead, he exclusively focuses on the suffering wild animals endure apart from human involvement. And you're about to hear plenty of examples of that from Alex himself. His claim is essentially that the existence of an all-powerful and all-loving God is implausible given the amount of pain animals have to live with in the natural order created by God. And since there are literally trillions of animals, the problem of animal suffering is, according to Alex, even bigger than the problem of human suffering. Or as he puts it,
if the problem of suffering is historically one of Christianity's biggest problems, then the problem of animal suffering is its biggest.
Here is how he starts his case.
So I should probably begin by unpacking why animal suffering is such a problem worth addressing in the first place. If human life is, as I've argued, infused with pain, then non-human animal life is defined by pain.
Okay, let's pause here for a moment. I don't know where Alex gets this idea that animal life is defined by pain. I mean, are we really to believe that the thing that defines a dolphin, a butterfly, or a chimpanzee is the experience of pain? Why is this the ultimate identity marker for what it means to live as an animal? Why not the urge to reproduce or the urge to feed? No, it's pain, says Alex, and we're gonna see later that this directly contradicts evolutionary theory. But let's indulge Alex for a moment and see why he thinks that pain is the real deal.
Animals in the wild are subject to endless torment from all angles of their existence.
Yeah, sure, I totally buy that. No, I mean, come on, seriously? Does Cosmic Skeptic really think that we're gonna fall for his emotional appeal? That all animals from the moment they're born until they die are endlessly tormented? Man, and I always thought Alex doesn't believe in hell. Yeah, I mean, look at these, the torment is tremendous. Or here, torment from every angle of their existence. I mean, consider that while you're watching this video, every wild animal is being tormented every single second of its life. God is so mean. But Alex isn't done yet.
They suffer from predation by other animals. Wild dogs disembowel their prey. Venomous snakes cause slow internal bleeding and paralysis. Crocodiles drown large animals in their jaws.
Now, the topic of predation features very prominently in Alex's talk. And he makes a big deal out of the fact that animals can die a violent death as a result of it. I will pick this up later and show you why in his emotional fervor, Alex completely misses the point here. Finally,
and animals also suffer from rampant disease, dehydration, and starvation. They have to contend with forest fires and floods and a whole manner of other terrifying natural disasters.
Oh boy, I mean, yes, you're right. Look at the dehydration these elephants suffer while they are being endlessly tormented by the lack of water. Oh, clearly, Alex is spot on. Now, maybe this was cheap, I'm sorry, but please allow me to explain myself. First, my point is not to make fun of Alex because he cares for animals, not at all. I am the truly happy father of a 9-year-old boy, my son Aaron, who has single-handedly organized over 30 kids at his school into a Safe Green and Save Animals advocacy group, and leads them in picking up trash and helping worms, bugs, and ants in the school courtyard. I feel nothing but gratitude and respect for the drive he has, and I can honestly say that his passion challenges me. In the same way, the authentic example Alex sets when it comes to caring for animal well-being unsettles me in a very positive sense. In fact, I've told my son Aaron about Alex, and I have explained to him that we can learn an awful lot from Alex.
Let's save animals.
So yes, that's my son, and again, my point is not to make fun of Alex. But what I want you to catch is this: Alex's case is essentially an emotional appeal that seriously lacks nuance. Now, given that Alex feels passionate about animal well-being, it's only natural for him to throw his emotions into the mix. In fact, I have pointed out in another video that I highly respect Alex for not just engaging in disinterested armchair philosophy, but for actually living out the stuff he talks about. So my criticism applies not in the slightest to Alex as a person, but to Alex's case, which essentially presents us with a one-sided story replete with emotions. You know, if Alex wouldn't have gone all emotional on us with his talk of the endless torment and insidious levels of unthinkable suffering endured by animals, but presented a factually more accurate picture of how sentient existence actually plays out, his case wouldn't even be half as appealing. Philosophical arguments simply don't work that way, and we are about to see how Alex's ideas directly contradict evolutionary science, which Alex hijacks to make his case. But first, I just want to point out what's at stake here, and this is critical. Remember that, according to Alex, animal suffering is not just any old problem Christianity faces, but it's historically its biggest problem. He claims that it's far easier to explain the tremendous amount of pain plaguing animals against the assumption that an all-loving and all-powerful God does not exist.
Now, pause. Think about this. What would we expect to find if we assume that there is no God, and animals in nature are just randomly mutating and evolving and competing for resources with no divine guidance? Well, we'd expect pretty much exactly what we observe in the real world: a messy bloodbath and a struggle for survival. And what would we expect to see if we assumed the existence of an all-loving and all-powerful God? Maybe some level of suffering that we might not be able to fully explain, but nothing even remotely approaching the level of horror and pain that actually exists in the natural world. It is incalculably easier to account for this suffering on an atheistic worldview.
Now let's apply Alex's logic to the following hypothetical scenario. Let's say we happened not to find a messy bloodbath and that it was not the case that animal life is defined by pain. But instead, we found a world in which animal life happens to be defined by pleasure. A world in which animals are not endlessly tormented in an earthly hell, but where they are alive and well, healthy and happy, and enjoying themselves, in a kind of earthly heaven instead. Such blissful animal existence would not, according to Alex's own logic, constitute the biggest problem of Christianity, but the biggest problem of atheism. Because if it is incalculably easier to account for the suffering, that is, the horror and pain that actually exists in the natural world, on an atheistic worldview, it also holds that it would be incalculably harder to account for a happy animal existence on an atheistic worldview, and at the same time incalculably easier to account for it on a Christian worldview. Now, mark these words as we're finally moving from cosmic skeptics' emotional drama to actual scientific theory. I'll be citing an accomplished Austrian academic called Martin Balluch, who has studied applied mathematics, astronomy, physics, and theoretical physics. He has taught and done research at Cambridge and other universities. But there is more, and this will be of particular interest to Alex. One of the PhDs Dr. Balluch holds is on the philosophy of animal rights, and he has moved on to become a prominent animal rights activist in Europe. He's co-founder of what is one of the most influential associations against animal factories in the German-speaking world, the Verein gegen Tierfabriken, which I used to support in my early 20s. Balluch has led countless campaigns for animal rights and has received international awards for his efforts. Now here is what he says. Being just back from a trip with the tent into the wilderness, I realized once again the truth of the statement, most wild animals are happy most of the time. I say that because I keep seeing animals in the wild and they almost always seem content and happy. Some are frolicking in the sun, some are playing, some are making love, some are resting and simply enjoying themselves. In only very rare occasions do I see animals who are suffering. Well, I would not have thought this statement to be remarkable, but for some people it is. For people like Alex, you mean? Let's continue. My primary argument for the above statement that most wild animals are happy most of the time is not just my observation, but also from evolution. Being happy is an important psychological state for animals in order to be healthy. A happy animal has not just a much better immune system, he or she is also active and inquisitive. Being happy and content is a vital ingredient to procreate and to live safely and long. Hence, evolution will produce animals who are mostly happy. Of course, if you assume evolutionary theory, this makes complete sense, doesn't it? Happiness is the psychological state most conducive to survival, which is why evolution will produce happy animals, rather than animals that are all sad and terrified because Alex believes them to be tortured day and night, which they obviously aren't. Hence the title of Baluch's article, Most Wild Animals Are Happy Most of the Time. Finally, Baluch states, it is true that most animals die a violent death in the wild, but that does not contradict the above statement. If I am killed today, I would still have lived a mostly happy life. Remember, I told you that while the issue of predation is a big deal for Alex, he misses the point completely, and Baluch exposes plainly and clearly why this is so. The 1, 2 or 3 minutes of pain an animal may experience before it dies does not negate the fact that it has led a happy existence for years before that. And by the way, there are trillions of animals who die year in, year out of old age or some sort of disease without experiencing any significant pain whatsoever. So let's put all the pieces together. According to Alex, animal life is supposedly defined by pain, a gloomy existence of endless torment in an earthly hell. He tells us that, of course, this is pretty much exactly what we'd expect to find if we assume that the all-loving and all-powerful God of Christianity does not exist. And he calls this Christianity's biggest historical problem. What is his case built on? Mainly on emotions. In contrast, Baluch shows, not by emotional appeal, but on the basis of his own observation, experience, and chiefly the scientific theory of evolution, that animal life is defined not by pain, but by pleasure, as evolution will produce animals who are mostly happy, frolicking in the sun, playing, making love, resting, and enjoying themselves. You might describe this as an earthly heaven. So to say that Alex has gotten reality upside down when he told us that animal life is defined by pain is an understatement. Actually, the exact opposite seems to be true, that animal life is defined by pleasure. Now remember, it's Alex himself who asserted that it is incalculably easier to account for this suffering on an atheistic worldview. What he meant by this suffering is the messy bloodbath we supposedly observe in the real world, which, according to Alex, is what we would expect to find if we assume that there is no God. Well, the only problem is that we don't actually observe this suffering in the real world, but only in the fictional world Alex has orchestrated for us in his emotional drama. What we do observe in the real world is that animals are, as science tells us, almost always content, suffering in only very rare occasions and happy most of the time. Thus, if Alex is to apply his very own reasoning consistently, he would have to agree that it is incalculably harder to account for this happiness on an atheistic worldview, because it's the very opposite of what we'd expect to find if we assume that there is no God. At the same time, according to Alex's logic, it is incalculably easier to account for this happiness on a Christian worldview, because it is, as Alex himself tells us, exactly what we would expect to see if we assumed the existence of an all-loving and all-powerful God. That is, some level of suffering that we might not be able to fully explain, but most of all, happiness. So where does this leave us? It leaves us staring at the rubble of Alex's supposedly biggest case against Christianity, which has utterly collapsed under the weight of reality. A reality that is infused with far more beauty and goodness than Alex imagines. Or to borrow a term from the most prominent atheist thinker turned Christian in the 20th century, we may say that Alex's case has collapsed under the weight of glory. In other words, and I find this to be truly beautiful, Cosmic Skeptic, one of the biggest atheist YouTubers, in putting forward his biggest case against God, has offered us and himself his own most powerful case for him. Now I submit it's on Alex to follow the evidence and the logic of his very own case where it leads. That is, to the cross of Christ, where the God he tried to argue against supremely revealed who he is. The all-loving source of the beauty and goodness we and the animals get to experience in the world he created. If you enjoyed this video, can I please ask you to share it with as many people as possible? Given that my channel is still pretty small, this video would never get as many views as Alex's original video. So please help me to push this out as much as possible. That would be super awesome. And then please move over here to watch my more personal response to Alex. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next time.